T, the top 3 hot anime boys from Final Fantasy.
Top 3 hot anime boys? Boy, how do I whittle it down to just 3? Squall, the Gunblade, and Cloud.
Welcome everyone to a special Diet Twin Cast. My name is Clark. Joining us today is Cam. Cam, how are you?
I'm doing great.
And T. How's your Sunday going, T?
It's going great.
So we are doing a Diet Twin Cast where we wanted to jump into something that is kind of in line with what we talk about with old video games, but also has a lot to do with one of our other hobbies, and that's Magic the Gathering. Because there's a crossover set coming to Magic the Gathering with Final Fantasy. So we're going to jump in here. We're going to give a little bit of background on our experience with both franchises, with Magic and with Final Fantasy, and then talk a little bit about what we would look for in a set from Magic the Gathering for the Final Fantasy franchise. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just kind of jump into a little bit. Cam, can you, since all of our audience might not be hardcore Magic the Gathering fans, could you just give us a quick explanation of what that is?
Sure. We're not hardcore Magic the Gathering fans either.
Yeah.
Super hardcore. But
Yeah, you thought this podcast could get any nerdier. Oh, it's about to. Buckle up,
man.
guys.
This is a clash of two very nerdy things. So, Magic the Gathering is a collectible trading card game that came out in 1993. So it's the granddaddy of all these games. So if you've ever seen people in a card shop playing cards, this is the first one of those. So you think of Pokemon also, or Yu-Gi-Oh, or some Star Wars has some variants of this.
Lorcana is one of the newest ones.
Yeah, so basically they have sets that come out that come in packs of cards, and they're curated and play tested to be played with the sets that they're in and within the wider of all the sets that have come out. So you open your cards, each card has a thing that it does, and you build decks of these cards that you can use to battle against other people who have also opened cards, traded them around, and built their own decks. And there's various ways to do this, various formats. It's just the basic level there is you open your cards and you can... There's some of them are worth money, some of them have value beyond just the play value, and that's what people love about it. People love the art on the cards, and it's just it's also, if you like building things, it kind of scratches the itch of building a deck that's yours, you thought up, and that's kind of...
And there's various formats and things. And Trevor, I was hoping you could describe for the audience what it smells like in a card shop.
Wow. It defies description, but I'll do my best. It's hopes and dreams have gone there, and somebody put them in a fridge for 3 months, forgot about these hopes and dreams, and they are moldy and stale, and then you open it, and that's what a card shop smells like when you go into these places.
Perfect. I can just visualize that.
I had to paint a picture for you. I should describe what a fresh pack of cards smells like when you open up the booster pack. That's like Christmas morning and Toys R Us had a baby. It's great.
That is the best smell.
Yeah, it is called cardboard crack by some people. One of the things that Cameron didn't kind of hit on a little bit is that there's a huge aspect to these games for playability and collectability. So there's both aspects here. What's interesting is Magic the Gathering for a long time has been really heavily into the player base plays the game a lot. But then something like Pokemon, people play Pokemon, but by and large, most of the people who play Pokemon they're a little bit of the minority. A lot of people just do Pokemon to collect the cards, put them in a binder, and have a collection. So Magic has been expanding the collectability side of it, and there's always been that aspect, but by and large, the player base are just that, they're players.
I think so. I started out my life playing Pokemon, and then I got into Magic later on. And it is definitely difficult to look back and think and try to remember what was fun about Pokemon, because the depth of play that's possible with Magic is, I think, the thing that keeps people coming back. There's some very deep strategies and some deep thinking that people put into their decks, into their cards.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty gone through peaks and valleys of my Magic fandom. Right now, I'm in a valley, kind of lapsed from it, but there's something that always pulls you back into Magic. The gameplay, like Trevor said, is timeless. Cam and I curate what's called the Cube, which is a personalized Magic set that we choose the cards that go into that set. And then we take that cube and we do what's called the draft, where we all select cards from that cube to battle them against each other. So in that sense, that's how I interact with Magic mostly now. Cam, are you the same way?
Yeah, I'm in the exact same boat as you. I did want to kind of elaborate a little bit about the draft. Drafting Magic is really fun because you get to do the most fun thing in Magic.
It's the best way to play Magic.
Yeah, you get to open a pack of cards and it's random. You don't know what you're going to get. And you get to look at just your pack of cards, read all the things that's in there. You just select just one of them, put it down, and then everyone passes their next booster, and then you get the next one. Everyone's actively building their deck as you're drafting the cards. That's one of my favorite ways to play, too. It's the best way.
That kind of brings up one of my complaints about Magic is that, and it's probably true of most of these kinds of games, is that you can really pay to play. If you have the money, you can go in and break everybody else's experience. So I really do enjoy the cube environment, where it's a self-contained set. Everybody it's random, but everybody has equal chance of getting these cards. Or drafts, like that one time when we went to a card shop for a set that had just come out and we just drafted those cards. That's my favorite way to play, because if you go beyond that, I really enjoy Commander, but and that's just a play style that you can play, but basically you're limited to the people around you who have a similar budget and skill set as you. Because if you go outside of that, all of a sudden you're going to be dealing with people that spend way too much time and money on building their decks, and then you don't have a candle, you don't have a prayer to play these guys.
You do see that a little bit in Commander too, and that's one thing I guess we should mention, is that Commander is by far and away the most popular way to play Magic right now. It's what's kind of driving a lot of card designs and business decisions by Wizards of the Coast, the creator of Magic the Gathering, is they see that most people are playing Magic, so they're designing. So there's going to be a lot of cards in this set that will be designed for Commander. And, Cam and I, we play Commander a tiny bit. I have a few Commander decks, and it's fun to play every now and then.
Trevor has a few Commander decks, too.
Yeah, you do, too. But I rarely play that anymore, and what I'm really looking forward to with this set is drafting it.
Although the environment that they're probably going to have is just going to be a lot of the main characters that are in Final Fantasy are going to be primed to be used as commanders. The commander format is based around legendary creatures. The thing that people really love about commanders, you get to choose your one creature that's a legendary commander, and he's kind of like the leader of your whole deck, and you can base your whole deck around that one legendary creature, which you always have access to, whereas your other cards in your deck, you don't always have access to them.
So you can theme a whole deck around Vivi or Sephiroth or Cloud or, whatever.
Squall. Chocobo.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Chocobo's going to be a legendary.
They could do a legendary Chocobo, the big fat one.
I was about to say how many named Chocobo are in the thing, but the big fat one, there you go.
Okay, well, that's just a little bit of a primer about what Magic the Gathering is. Let's just talk a little bit. Our audience knows Final Fantasy, and let's talk a little bit about our experiences with Final Fantasy. And I actually want to start with you, T. What are your experiences with Final Fantasy?
So I have been exposed to it over the years, just by virtue of you guys, and it's a very popular franchise, of course, as well. But I have never played a full Final Fantasy game through. I played Dissidia, and I don't know if that counts because it's like Super Smash Brothers for Final Fantasy characters. But I really liked it. Characters are really cool. The designs are really cool. Other than that, yeah, it's just kind of been picking it up, playing a couple minutes here and there. So to do my research, I turned to Reddit and I posted just today. I said, if you had to explain Final Fantasy to someone who had no idea what it was in 2 or 3 sentences, what would you say? I had a few good responses here. An anime adventure where you kill God.
Yep.
Also an anime adventure in a fantasy world.
That's a good explanation right there.
Let's see. Ragtag group of adventurers overcome evil. Crystals are involved.
Yes, very often.
At least in the early ones. I don't know about the later ones as much.
It's a series of Japanese RPGs with a ton of spin-off titles that typically involve crystals and big yellow chickens. It's been around since the 80s, so you've got a lot of range from the NES to PS5. That is basically my entire understanding of Final Fantasy as we go into this episode. So I am the least qualified here to talk about Final Fantasy, but you're about to listen to me talk about it for an hour.
Well, when we were brainstorming for this episode, you said something to you that I thought made a lot of sense of why bringing you on this podcast is good, because you know how a lot of stories has like a audience stand-in where the regular characters on the screen have to explain someone to the newbie in the story, and that newbie is sort of the audience stand-in. You're sort of the audience stand-in here for this. We mentioned this a lot, but Cam and I are going to have a lot of shared experiences, but I'm going to let you kick it off here. What are your experiences with Final Fantasy?
Okay, well, it started with Final Fantasy 1 on our Nintendo. We were going on vacation up to our cabin one summer, and we stopped at the local mall, a town that we were driving through, and we found a copy of Final Fantasy in the bargain bin or something like that. And we just happened to we were bringing our Nintendo up to our cabin so we could play it, and that was the game we picked up and we played it. And I remember getting hooked pretty quickly on the mechanics. We had a little bit of experience with role-playing games before this. Dragon Warrior, basically. Not much
and
else.
I think at this
that.
time, this was a little bit later in the NES life cycle. I think we had seen Tim play like maybe Final Fantasy 2/4 on this SNES at this time.
The SNES had already come out?
I want to say yes, but maybe not.
Anyway, I eventually played through this whole game, which wasn't easy at the time because it's a pretty straightforward game, but there are some cryptic things in it. So that was my first experience. And then I would go on to play through 1. I've played all the way through 4 on Super Nintendo, and I've played through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I even played the spin-offs of 10, 10-2, and then parts of 11. And then I kind of stopped after that, and I've played parts of 15, and I played the demo of 16. That's my experience.
Did any of them make you cry?
Man, Final
10.
Fantasy 9 and 10 are pretty emotional games.
Man.
I remember I was playing through 10 with my kids watching me, and Hannah got emotional at the end of 10. So I won't give away any spoilers here.
Yeah, I'll start crying.
They're pretty well known for trying to pull the old heartstrings in some of the stories, at least back from, well, maybe 6, but especially 7 on what they do in the storytelling.
Well, supposedly you kill God, so it's got to be pretty emotional, right?
Yeah.
That you don't take that lightly.
No. The god comes in different forms. In the first game, it's Chaos. They better have a pretty cool Chaos card.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to add too much more to what Cam said. I will just say that we call out our friend Tim quite a bit on this podcast, but I remember he brought over when we were, I want to say 2nd grade is when I became friends with Tim, or maybe it was 3rd grade. Anyways, he came over and hung out with us and brought Dragon Quest with, and we played it. And that was sort of my introduction to those kind of games. And I just loved the slower pace, turn-based
single player.
The single player aspect of it, where on the NES it was a lot of action platformers and things at the time, but this was something like, hey, pump the brakes and think about what you're doing. And I really enjoyed that. At the time, you know, you're just jumping from platform to platforms usually in games like this one. You would go into a dark dungeon and everything would be dark and you wouldn't know where you go, and you didn't know what you would find. You didn't know if an enemy was going to pop up and kill you. It was very adventuresome, a lot different, and this Final Fantasy really built on that. So by the time I got Final Fantasy, loved it for everything that Cameron said. I will say that one of my real loves from Final Fantasy has always been the music, which is not going to be reflected in the Magic the Gathering set, really. But I always love the music, and that's one of the things that consistently draws me back to Final Fantasy.
Is there any overarching story to speak of in the Final Fantasy series?
No, there's not. There are some recurring named characters that have the same name, but they're just different characters. So, like, for instance, there's a Cid in most of the games, CID in 15. Cid is actually like a mechanic that's a girl. In the other ones, Cid is something else. Like Final Fantasy VII, Cid is Cid Highwind, pilot of the airship that you fly in that game.
So they're not connected. It's just the same name in all these different
There's
games.
just themes and the themes that people mentioned in your Reddit post.
They all have chocobos and moogles.
Most of these games have what are called summons, which are like powerful creatures that you summon from like another plane to come in and fight along with you in battle, and then they'll leave. They're usually the same between installments.
So I saw that about Final Fantasy X, the mechanics switched. It was like Final Fantasy XI, they made it more modern or something. So not all the games have similar mechanics then.
Well, in 10, it's still turn-based. The big change in 10 that they made was the overworld map. So up to 9, it was just a traditional, like, you'd go around your town or your dungeons, but then you could go outside those things and you would be on a big overworld map. Starting in 10, they stopped with that, and it was more of little instances and stuff that you would go through. 11 is an MMO, so that one is way different than everything else that came before it. And 14 is also an MMO.
I will say that Final Fantasy kind of has a pedigree of pushing the envelope of technology where it can and changing things up from instance to instance. That's sort of what it's done. Whereas sort of the companion series that we keep bringing up too, Dragon Quest / Dragon Warrior, that one's the more traditional and has stuck to what the Japanese role-playing games have done, like the turn-based battles, traditional art styles, and things like that.
All the new ones nowadays, they're not turn-based, really. They have some kind of turnish things, like an active time battle where you can use abilities in time, but everything is just like, kind of like a straight-up action game.
So, since there's not an overarching story necessarily, and the mechanics have changed pretty dramatically over time and even from game to game, what is it that makes a Final Fantasy game part of the series? Like what makes Final Fantasy Final Fantasy?
Ooh, asking the deep questions.
Yeah. You kill God in this game. I feel like, I mean, we've already hit the deepness here.
The real answer is I don't even know if the creators know exactly the answer to that question, because they have been kind of throwing things at the wall the last few installments, and some of it sticks and some of it doesn't. A lot of it is what was mentioned in that Reddit post, is the sense of adventure. You're going on in like a big quest. You have certain mythical creatures that show up in all of them, like the chocobos that Cam said. And then to me, it's just the presence of magic, but it's not even like fantasy is used in quotes, I think, because you have like the high fantasy, that's where it starts, which is very similar to Tolkien and classical fantasy. But in the game that you see back here, this is Final Fantasy VI, that's when they started to kind of go into more steampunk. They're still fusing fantasy elements into steampunk. I know Final Fantasy 15, they're driving around in cars. It's kind of jumbled, but there are those few threads that kind of carry through.
Yeah, and I would think you would expect in all the Final Fantasies to have a strong story for whatever system they're on. They like to tell a narrative story, and it usually ends up being super crazy. It goes off the rails usually.
It usually goes anime. Yeah. That's a nice summary of our experiences with Final Fantasy, getting T up to speed on some of the basics with Final Fantasy. Let's talk a little bit now about what we would want out of a Final Fantasy set. Cam, I'm going to start with you on this. You order your Final Fantasy booster box. Which kind of cards are you looking to get? How are you looking to interact with it? What are you hoping to see when you start opening the packs?
the best and most important thing is that it's fun to play. I know we've talked a lot about collectibles and cool art. To me, Magic is about playing a game. Because it's set in Final Fantasy and I know these characters and I know what's going on, I want something that's super fun to play, and I also recognize what's going on. The thing that I really want the most is to have themes for each of the games that work together. Does that make sense? I think it would be fun to be able to build like, hey, here's my Final Fantasy VIII commander deck, Squall's my leader, and I can have everything in that deck be from Final Fantasy VIII, not have to borrow from 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I know that's probably not going to happen because that would be such a huge design space.
Well, unless they give you pre-constructed commander decks like they've done with Warhammer, where the whole deck is like, even though it had existing cards that they used from Magic's history, they reskinned them to look like Warhammer. They could do that with like a Final Fantasy VIII deck, right?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hoping for is cool themes that make me feel like it's Final Fantasy, cool art, which I don't have any doubt there'll be cool art, and that it's fun to play. That's my biggest hope, and we can get into some nitty-gritty stuff about specific cards and stuff I might be looking up, but I'll talk about that later.
So T, kind of the same question, but maybe phrased a little bit differently. Is there anything besides maybe your uncle's like dragging you into a draft to make you do this? Like, is there anything in this set that you would be looking that would motivate you to try it on your own, like, or to go out and buy a pack if you see it at Walmart or whatever?
Yeah, it would definitely come down to the mechanics that they're wanting to include it. And as of last night, there hadn't been anything spoiled. It was just artwork. I will say I think I have more fears than hopes out of this set. I think, not being a Final Fantasy fan, I look at this and I'm like, man, I hope that Magic doesn't get too cute on me. Like, I think that Magic stands strongly on its own. And so including this stuff is a cool fan service, but it almost reminds me of, what were those 2 joke sets? That had Den and Walk. Unhinged, yeah.
There's like 4 joke sets now.
I don't want to see that. And I know that they're going to take this seriously, and I know that there's going to be really good cards. But that's what I'm very curious about is, are there actually going to be cards in here that are going to appeal to players for their own sake? Like, is there going to be a card that people are going to want for its own sake and not just because of the Final Fantasy nod? And I'm curious about that.
This is not the first time Magic has done a crossover similar like this.
Right.
They did a much huger one a couple years ago with Lord of the Rings, a much bigger even IP than Final Fantasy. So, yeah, and I would say that a lot of those cards have crossed over into mainstream and are played all the time in various formats.
Yeah, in fact, we're opening up the Pandora's box here of what's called Universes Beyond. For those who don't know much about Magic and Magic design, you have the in-universe Magic stuff, which is what Trevor was talking about, which has been around since 1993, so almost 32 years at this point of Magic lore, Magic IP. But about 5 years ago, they started doing what's called Universes Beyond, where they bring in other IPs, and the first one they did was from The Walking Dead. That rustled a lot of jimmies when they did that. And angry keyboard warrior nerds are still up in arms about it, and they have the same concerns that you do, T, is that, this is going to water down the Magic set. Now, maybe we'll table some of this discussion for a little bit later, because I think there's actually some more reason for those keyboard warriors to be concerned, because starting with this set, this is going to be the first Magic the Gathering set that is Universes Beyond, but also coming into Standard. Because that set that Cameron talked about, the Lord of the Rings set, that came into a format which is a more legacy format, which is cards didn't come into the newer pool. They went into the older pool exclusively, so people didn't have to play it with all the newer cards. This set's going to be coming in with all the newer cards.
And so they're going to be forced to play with it if you play Standard.
Yep. If you play Standard, you're gonna play these cards, and that's got a lot of people really upset. Cameron talked about gameplay, and I echo everything that he says. Art, I just want to see, just pick on that thread a little bit. Magic art is really great, and I'm going to mess up the name. Yomano, I think, is the artist's name. I'll have to double check
the Final Fantasy artist?
The Final Fantasy concept artist. In fact, Trevor, have you seen any of the, like, well, I guess it's not just concept art, but like their official art that goes into like their marketing materials and used to go into their manuals and things like that? Have you seen that art
Like
before?
the stylized, and that's, well, and actually maybe to answer my earlier question, that is maybe one of those threads that holds Final Fantasy together, is that it's a very identifiable art style.
Yoshitaka Amano is the name of the artist. And Cam can drop some things in here, but anyone else who's listening to the podcast, just Google and then go to images and see, like, the art is just, it's fantastic. So I'm looking forward to seeing this art. And then I hope one of the things that Magic does, and it drives some people crazy, and it's driven me crazy in some sets, but for a set like this, I'd be all for it. They will print one card in multiple styles. So you might get, just because we'll just pick up some of the characters that are the most popular, you might get a Cloud Strife card that is in the Magic the Gathering artist. So Magic has a stable of artists that they usually use in a pretty recognizable art style. That'll usually be the base version of the card. But then you might get 3 or 4 different versions of that card with different art. So we might get one that is the Yoshitaka Amano art of Cloud. We might get another art that's like the pixel art, or maybe the polygon art from the Final Fantasy VII, or
I
from
really do.
From the PlayStation version.
I really do hope they have pixel art. I will like that.
Yeah, so that's also one of my big wants for this set. Cam, you mentioned that playability and fun is the number one thing that you're looking for. Like, diving into card specifics, are there any mechanics that you would be looking for on these Magic cards?
I was thinking about this. You had mentioned some things that you were looking for, and as you were mentioning that, I was thinking something that's maybe commander specific that could be cool. This might be kind of far out there. But Final Fantasy has always kind of had a relationship with their characters and like materia, like as in Final Fantasy VII, the materia, or the big summons, the guardian forces and stuff like that. So I was thinking Magic has a mechanic called partner, and I was wondering if they could maybe wrangle in some for commander partner mechanics where you would choose your commander like Cloud, but then you could have a partner that you, when you class Cloud, you could partner up with like Ifrit or Shiva or something like that, where you can search up one of those cards.
Well, yeah, there was that battle bond mechanic where it was like partner with. Like, you could, when you cast it, you got to search your library for that card.
Yeah, so I thought that went really well with the summons specifically. That's what I was talking about.
I think that's an A tier idea. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I was thinking, I really hope that they have a partner with a summon. Would be pretty awesome with Commander.
Well, you could even do that with not just Commander. You could do that, and that mechanic translates to 60 card constructed as well.
Yeah.
And draft too. T, I don't know, with your limited Final Fantasy knowledge, you might not have like a wealth of ideas, but if you were gonna come in and be a designer on this set, what would you be looking to do and add to get people excited?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me from my limited knowledge of Final Fantasy is some of the equipment cards. Cloud's sword, Squall's sword gun. I'm genuine the gunblade. I'm genuinely interested to see how those turn out. I think that those could be cool.
Yeah, so I guess here's a follow-up question, and Trevor, you might not know the whole context here, but what would be the most hype equipment from the Final Fantasy series, Cam? Maybe answer for yourself, and then answer like maybe just the fans.
Well, for me, I really like Final Fantasy VIII. It would probably be Gunblade, but I'm trying to think of what would be the most. Is there a one right answer for this that I should know?
Oh, I'm genuinely curious.
Okay, well, for me, it was probably the Gunblade, but Cloud's sword is pretty iconic. Maybe it's probably Cloud's sword.
Well, the Buster sword, or
Buster
I guess
sword,
there's also Sephiroth's sword. It might even be more iconic than Cloud's sword.
What was the set that introduced that dungeon where you would like move through the dungeons on your little card? What was that set?
That was the Dungeons and Dragons, and that's actually one of my things I pitched in here. Is dungeon cards.
Okay, yeah, because I was gonna say, I wonder if they do like some sort of side quest card.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the things that I have listed here, and let's do that format that I mentioned here. I'll just pitch you guys an idea, and then you guys tell me what you think about the idea. Give me some feedback, or I guess in this case, give wizards some feedback on if you think that would be good in the set or not.
I also have a couple more ideas I want to throw to at the end.
Yeah. Go ahead, Cam. You go.
Right now?
Yeah.
I think there needs to be vehicles. Is this one of your ideas?
No, I didn't have vehicles on here. That's
like a chocobo could be a vehicle, or it could be a creature too. But
or like the high wind.
Like the ships,
the different airships.
Different airships. But what I really want is like a garden. Do you know what I want? A
Balam Garden.
Balam Garden. I want that as a vehicle.
Dude, what? Oh man, what you could do is you could actually like, you've seen this before, but like you could reskin the airships from the different series. You could just have one airship because you don't want to use up all your design space and do like 8 different airships, right? But you can do one airship, but then you could like have different versions for the different airships there. Yeah. Or you could do the Balam Gardens. Is that technically an airship? I don't even know.
Well, it's not an airship, but it's a movable vehicle. Do you remember in that game where the gardens can uproot themselves and start going around the map? Yeah, so it's definitely it needs to be a vehicle.
Oh, so we've got mobile gardens, yellow chickens, and you kill God.
Well, the gardens is more than just like a little garden. It's like a big, huge, complex school thing. It's like a military school. They just call them gardens for some reason. So it's a big military complex school thing.
Oh, we need a ghost train from this game here.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is you need a way to suplex the ghost train. Famously,
Classic.
T, you could suplex. There was a move that you could do in the game called suplex, and then you could pick up the ghost train and suplex it.
What a wild ride I'm on right now.
Okay, so let me pitch you this idea. There's a mechanic called level up in Magic. It's in the past it's usually been a keyword that you have to pay at sorcery speed, which means that you can't just do it anytime. You have to do it on your main phase on your turn. You would pay just some usually mana cost, and then a creature would level up and it would get stronger and maybe get some abilities. My idea is to bring that back, but instead of having it be triggered on paying a cost, that it would be at the end of combat ability. So like you get a combat, and then the creature would have line of text on it that says, at the end of combat, if this creature attacked this turn, level up, and then it would level it up.
Just like in Final Fantasy. So yeah, I like that idea. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
So that's definitely a top-down design. That's what happens in the old games with the turn-based combat. They had a combat, you survive, you get experience, and you get stronger.
Yeah, I like
that's
that
cool.
idea.
That is cool. Yeah, I like that.
Ability counters is something that came into Magic with Ikoria. Have you used ability counters at all, T? So with Magic, they historically, actually from the very first set, they have what were the +1/+1 counters,
right?
Which would just indicate an increase in power or defense. But about 5 years ago, they came out with ability counters that would give creatures lifelink or death touch. So you would just, on the creature, you would just put the counter and it would indicate that it got that ability. My idea is to do that with materia on equipment. So you can augment your equipment with these counters that would then also imbue your characters with those abilities. So if you have Cloud's sword and you put a green materia counter that's the lifelink ability, then whoever equips that sword would also get the lifelink ability.
Yeah, so like enchanting your equipment almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think that's cool.
That fits really well with the Final Fantasy theme of augmenting your weapons. You would say like, okay, there's the Buster Sword. It has 2 materia slots, so you could put 2 different kinds of materia in it. You can give it like lifelink or first strike and death touch or whatever.
Yeah, and there's lots of design space there too. So like maybe when you cast the Buster Sword, it comes in and you get to choose a materia to slot into it. But then maybe later you get a card that says add a blank materia to an equipment you own or something, and maybe it'll give your creatures first strike if it has that materia.
I could see that getting
And
Pretty
so it's sort of
OP,
like
pretty
build
fast.
your own hero type of aspect, which was kind of what role-playing games were, what I found really fun in role-playing games back then, is you had sort of like a blank canvas of a hero, and then you would gear up that hero with the spells and abilities and things that you would want. In this way, it would be done through probably equipment.
It's cool. Yeah.
Something else I want to pitch you guys is something representing towns. And the pitch for this is the towns would probably mostly act like enchantments on the board, but they would just represent places that you've visited on your quest, right? So you might go to, or maybe Balam Garden can be one of the locations, but just one of the hallmarks of all Final Fantasy games is you're going from town to town to town, right? And learning story, getting equipment, and leveling up in gears. If there was like a town ability, have you seen battles? T? Do you know what battles are in Magic the Gathering? It's kind of a fairly new mechanic.
No.
It's an enchantment that stays out. In that mechanic, you attack it to really activate it, but that I don't think it would be that way. But it's an enchantment that really represents something that has happened or something that you've done in the past, and that's why I say these town cards could kind of be that way. Oh, you've been to this town, you get this enchantment buff for your team because you've learned things or from that town.
Yeah. I like that. What are those other enchantments called? The
Room enchantments?
sagas?
Sagas.
Yeah,
Yes,
sagas.
there you go.
Sagas could they could be saga-ish.
Sagas would be great for this set. I think class cards would be good. Maybe you can put up some examples of some class cards here, Cam. But they're enchantments that they came in Dungeons and Dragons, like Bard class is an example of one, that basically just give you as the Planeswalker static abilities. I think it would be really cool to have class cards, because not all Final Fantasies, but some Final Fantasies have a class system. And I tend to really like the Final Fantasies that do have some sort of class system in there. T, you said dungeons. I think dungeons would be really cool if they could find a way to adapt it into the set.
It would be awesome if you had to spend 50 to 60 hours running errands for a shopkeeper in order to progress to the next stage of the quest card.
There you go.
So I was looking at buying the Final Fantasy VII Remake just because it's iconic and it's classic, and I've never played a Final Fantasy game. And I was looking it up and I was like, oh man, like 60 to 70 hours. And that was part 1.
Yeah.
So that's actually ultimately why I didn't buy it, is because there was too much content.
Yeah, we need something to represent grinding, because
Right.
these old games have grinding, like you mentioned. And I don't. What would a grinding mechanic look like, Cam?
I don't know. Just a defensive style milling their deck kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe not mill.
I mean, the grinding in these games are the act of doing something repetitiously to
Very
level up.
slowly.
Maybe it could be captured somewhat in the level up mechanic that we talked about.
So I just had an idea. Some of the games have card games within them. Like Final Fantasy VIII has the triple triad, and I think 9 also had a card game too.
The latest one
great-
has called Queen's Blood. That's in Final Fantasy Rebirth.
Why don't we have TCG Inception here, where you get, was it Scheherazade, where you you play a game within the game, a game within the game. Bring back Scheherazade. That card's
I
banned,
like that.
by the way. That card's banned. We can play triple triad, a triple triad mini game.
Yeah, one game was not enough. You need 2.
Yeah. I think I'm going to cut my ideas off there. Those are the best ideas that I've had. Cam, any other ideas or T?
Yeah, something. I just want like some dumb mini game is what I really want. I want my card to force me to play some. I don't know. You have to go clean a ring for some bride who's like getting married later that day.
Yeah.
I feel that's gonna capture the essence of a JRPG in my mind.
Go save the lost cats or
Yeah.
something like that.
One of the things that Final Fantasy does do a lot is they have mini games in them. Final Fantasy VII is famous for having a bunch of these like little mini games that you could do. So
There's many games in Magic the Gathering you can think of. What's that mechanic called? Clash?
Clash, yeah.
You remember
did
Clash?
do-
is kind of like a mini game where you
You
both reveal the top card of your library,
Oh yeah, that's right.
and the highest one wins or whatever.
Oh.
It's sort of like war.
And there's flipping coins and stuff like that, too.
Yeah.
So one thing we didn't talk too much about is planeswalkers and how they would be dealt with in this. I would kind of like to see most of the heroes depicted as non-planeswalkers, but within the Final Fantasy canon, Clark, can you think of anything that would be a planeswalker?
Well, in my
I guess
in my notes I put summons as planeswalkers.
Oh, summons.
Because thematically, Ifrit joining you for just the battle after you've summoned it, after you build up enough resources to summon him for that one battle, and then he leaves, is a lot like planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering.
Why don't we meld our ideas together here, where you play your cloud card, and it's partnered with Ifrit, who's also a planeswalker.
Yeah, and it comes into play. That would be cool.
That would
and
be
you go search it up. I'd like that.
Yeah. Another thing is also limit breaks. I don't know. Could you incorporate any kind of limit break within Magic?
If you take so many points of damage, you get, maybe you have a card that's like a limit break card, and every time you take damage, you put a counter on it. And when it has so many counters on it, you take it off, and a big thing happens.
Yeah, I think that could be pretty cool, because I know Magic has done similar things like that. With the more damage you take, the more you get closer to a certain ability. I think that would be pretty cool to have a limit break.
That would be interesting, especially in Commander. That would be a really fun mechanic.
All right, well, this is kind of springing something on you, Cam. Let's have you, right now, let's brainstorm and design Squall Leonhart. What does a legendary Squall Leonhart look like? First off, he's going to be a legendary creature, right?
Yes.
And what colors of the Magic Pie would he be?
Let's see. He would probably be... He's kind of passive. He would probably be... white, obviously.
So virtue. He's got virtue.
Yeah. And probably maybe green. White, green.
White, green. I like that.
White, green, and maybe some red in there too. Maybe white, green, red, or just white, green. And he'd be like.
Okay, so let's talk about base power and toughness then. What would his base power and toughness be?
Well, with the way Magic design is, if he was just white, green, his cost, what is he costed here?
Why don't you talk about his power and toughness first, and then we'll go.
So,
we'll go back to the casting cost after we kind of fill out the rest of the card.
Squall, he's still kind of a student, but he is part of an elite military force. At the beginning of the game, he's taken his passing test. He's not too seasoned yet, so I'm thinking he's more of a 2/3. He's kind of a newbie.
So maybe a 2-mana 2/3. That sounds pretty good. Let's talk about the abilities that he has.
Socially awkward.
So he's got he's got menace, or he can avoid people, right?
Yeah, he's got menace.
So,
but in this case, that's not really a white-green ability. So
that's true.
If we're going white-green, I guess there's some sort of land walks that are kind of evasive. We could just do evasion, can't be blocked. Maybe we just, instead of green, we do blue, so he's white-blue with evasion.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Because he's a legendary commander, and because Wizards Fire design, he needs to have a million abilities. I guess focus on what would the abilities that you could build around, right? So you're putting cards in your deck based around his abilities.
So I think the evasion's probably a pretty good thing, and he has that gunblade. I think you obviously would maybe do an equip style because it's white and blue. Maybe he's partnered with his legendary gunblade. Maybe you can search up an equipment when he comes into play.
Okay. And would the gunblade give him reach?
He can search any equipment, or does it have to be the gunblade? Yeah, I guess they've done cards like this before. It says
So this would be
when you cast this card, if you have this legendary Gunblade equipment in your deck, you can search it up and put it onto the battlefield.
This sounds
Just
a little
that.
bit like we're going kind of down the Voltron path, which I don't know if you know what that means, but it's like a deck archetype where you pile a bunch of equipment on one creature or make one creature super strong.
Right.
So Squall gonna be a Voltron commander.
No, I don't think so. I think he only cares about the Gunblade. So he gets the Gunblade, and then he gets some sort of bonus maybe when he equips the Gunblade.
Maybe that could show him like he's passed his exams and now he's a leader in the Gunblade. Like when it's equipped, maybe a bunch of tokens come into play to follow him.
Yeah, possibly.
Or maybe it incorporates Clark's level up, and he gets like an automatic level up with the Gunblade, and there's like a tiers of leveling up that he gets as he attacks. He has to be attacking, and he gets that level up, but he's also unblockable for the most part, so he's easily able to attack.
I just don't think there's enough room on the card to put all that text.
I think this is exactly what Final Fantasy calls for. Some over-engineered... And he's the hottest character in your deck.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, by far.
Yeah.
All the ladies. Maybe when he comes into play, all the ladies are forced to attack him. What's that? Yeah, he's got the lure ability.
Well, that's good because that's the only ladies that anybody that plays this set is
and
gonna be
why
around.
limit it? Why limit it to just ladies? I think other people in the Final Fantasy verse would be very attracted to Squall. So,
T, has this conversation helped interest you a little bit in the set at all, or?
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I would love to do a draft with a set like this. I am still maybe more concerned now that this is gonna ruin Magic and Standard. But I'm curious, and I know that Wizards, they know what they're doing, so I imagine that they'll have some good designs and some relevant designs, not just appealing to the fans. But I think that's I'll be waiting with bated breath to see what this does.
Cam, I'm gonna let you have the final word, but before you do that, just my thoughts is that I'm excited for this set. I generally take the aspects of Universes Beyond where I just don't engage with the stuff that I'm not familiar with or care about. I know that there's like My Little Pony Universes Beyond stuff. I don't care about that. There's
SpongeBob coming next year.
There's SpongeBob and there's Hatsume Niku. I don't even know who that is. Like, I see people talking about it. I don't even care about any of that stuff. And I'm not bothered that stuff is there. But the stuff that I do care about, like Final Fantasy, I get excited for. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think they did a really good job with the Lord of the Rings set. I think they did a good job with Dungeons and Dragons. And I think that this Final Fantasy set has some similarities there. The one thought that I have that I am a little bit worried about is Lord of the Rings came directly into Modern that we mentioned earlier. And it was designed to go directly into Modern, which means that they weren't fettered by power level or the environment as much, because it was going into an environment where if they printed something a little bit too powerful, it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. This is going into an environment where they have to be really cautious about their designs, right? They can't just go willy-nilly and print something like the One Ring into Standard. So that could really limit what the designers can do. So that has me a little bit cautious about it. Cam, what are your finishing thoughts here?
I'm excited also. This is melding two of my interests. My main interest for the past couple of years has been retro video games. I love collecting and playing retro video games, and Final Fantasy is a huge part of that for me. I would say I'm not like a mega fan or anything. I just enjoy these games. And Magic, I have had a love-hate relationship with Magic in the past, but ultimately I do love Magic, and I love playing Magic. So these two coming together has piqued my interest, and I'm in the same boat as you. I'm optimistic, and I'm hoping that this will be a good time and that we can share our love of these things with all of you guys. So I know we have plans on creating some content around this. Hopefully it's good. So
T, send us out with the top 3 hot anime boys from Final Fantasy.
Top 3 hot anime boys. Boy, how do I whittle it down to just 3?
You probably only know 3.
I know.
If that.
Okay, here it is in no particular order: Squall, the Gunblade, and Cloud.
Wow, the Gunblade. Final Fantasy VIII gets 2 nods.
I remember watching my sister. She played. I think it was 15 because I remember her driving around in a car, and I remember all of those boys just being some hot boys.
So fresh, their haircuts are always on point.
Yeah,
they have all of the like chain accessories in leather.
Yeah. They're so cool. They're so cool. It's unfathomable.
And those boys could cook a mean ramen.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So, one more question for you, T. Like, if any of our listeners want to be more like these anime boys, what can they do?
Man, well, play Magic the Gathering because it is historically shown to be a huge babe magnet. That's the secret right there.
Yeah. With that, Diet Twin Cast is out.